Hello and welcome to the. Are we still calling ourselves the Midwest Dynasty Fantasy Baseball
Dude,
Podcast?
we got to stick to it. It's the OG name.
Can we call ourselves the Cocks Out to End the Lockout?
Yeah. Oh, that one's good.
Okay.
The Better Podcast.
The Better Podcast, yeah. Welcome. It is February 26th, 2022, the same day as our owners meeting. Looking forward to that in a couple hours. So how are you doing?
I'm doing good. How's it going for you, man? It's been a while.
Yeah. I'm going to start you off with a question. What do you think is more likely? That we don't get invaded by Russia, that COVID ends based on CDC guidelines, or that baseball starts? Which one of those things is going to happen first?
You know what? I bet it'll be baseball last. I bet the COVID pandemic knocks out Russia and takes care of them. So it's like a 2-for-1 right there. And then the pandemic ends once all the Russians die. Allegedly. Don't die, Russians. But just booty. But I don't know. The lockout's got to end eventually here, man. I know it's like, I think we get a month delayed. I bet you they start in May. That's my feelings on this.
Doesn't it just kind of make you sad? When you factor those three things in, those two things, like those first two things, COVID and the Russia invasion, that's some shit right there,
dude.
But then, us fantasy baseball addicts, we like to turn to baseball in times of sadness, and to hear so many people saying, "Yeah, it's not going to start on time." What is there to look forward to?
Hopefully no more snow. I truly don't know. I mean, like I put in about 3 or 4 hours within the last 2 days, just getting ready for the owners meeting, updating some other stuff on the record sheet. And I was so excited for baseball to start again here and just to have the opportunity to start looking into players, kind of dive into it. And then I had to take a step back and realize it might be for nothing.
I know.
And I was like, oh, it also was just interesting because it's like, I want to do my draft rankings and this and that, but we don't even know where all the free agents are. We don't know where they're going to end up. How can you evaluate your team right now when you still have guys that are free agents and you don't know where they're going to go? And for pitchers, that matters so much for them, what ballpark they're playing in.
And that's why I'm saying that, that's been constant in the back of my mind this entire time, is does this even matter? I feel like I'm singing Bohemian Rhapsody to myself, as I'm listening to podcasts for baseball and I'm thinking about it and I'm looking at my team. It's what happens if we just miss the first 100 games again and it completely turns it upside our head, just like we did 2 years ago? It's man, it's hard to be a baseball fan when you feel like, even the NFL, it's so funny the differences, because the NFL had a full season with COVID and now they don't have a lockout. But the MLB had a completely shortened season and might not even, who knows what happens with the lockout this year. So it's just weird as a fantasy footballer and baseballer.
Yeah, I don't feel any worry ever when I play fantasy baseball, or fantasy football, I should say, about, oh yeah, this could all come to an end. I actually worry about it with baseball, between the lowering popularity ratings and the fact that if they miss baseball games here, people are going to be mad. They're going to lose fans, and they've already been losing fans. And I don't know what's going to happen. I think they need to figure it out. And it's not, to me, I'm very much on the player side through everything I've looked at. And yeah, you can argue they're a little greedy here and there, but would you not be in their position a little bit? If you're noticing that guys that are in the first 6 years before they hit free agency are severely underpaid for being the product of baseball, wouldn't you want to like kind of fight to make sure that there's like some incentive-based programs for them to get paid if they perform well? Like, I don't really find it to be that much that they're asking for on that perspective. And then it's like just the overall competition of the game needs to be fixed. It's become way too much business and not focused on the fans and actually bringing in the revenue. I think that's the part that they always seem to forget is like the owners, in my opinion, is like, if you don't have fans, you don't have revenue. And then your investment in these teams literally drops to zero from whatever you bought them for, which is probably billions of dollars.
Yeah,
So.
if you haven't already watched Jeff Passan, Cody recommended this to me, which I might have found it because I watched Pat McAfee a lot anyway. But you got it pretty quickly in my airwaves. Is Jeff Passan, or Jet Passan as they call him, and I don't quite get that.
I've never heard that nickname. I'm gonna be honest, I had never heard that nickname for him.
That show's so weird, but you gotta love it. He was on the Pat McAfee show, and they just let him talk for 90% of it, but it was great. It was a great update on the lockout situation, and it was more about not necessarily the update on the lockout, but more just the philosophical viewpoints on each side. And to your point, it's difficult for me because I think that, yes, you can say like, oh, the owners don't get that. I think the problem is they do, but each side feels so justified that it's a game of chicken. Who's going to balk first, essentially?
Yeah.
And when you have that divide between the two sides, unfortunately, the people that have the paycheck signing capability, I think, have more power because they don't need baseball, really. A lot of owners' cash flow comes from sources other than baseball, or did at some point. You know, it's like the classic, this is something that Jeff Passan talked about, is that one of the AP news outlets got a ton of flack for making fun of Max Scherzer for arriving in a Porsche.
Oh my God.
Right? Because they're like,
that was so dumb.
If I was a stupid press reporter, I might make that joke because I would say, oh, they're talking about money and here he shows up in his Porsche. But then, as you know, they pointed out, well, yeah, but all the owners came in their private jets.
Yeah.
So, I'm afraid that disparity, that because the owners don't need baseball, is what's going to continue to drag this on. And it's the morality versus money, and how often does morality win, right?
Yeah, this really is a question of when do the players want to budge.
Mm-hmm.
Unfortunately, I hate that that's the reality of the situation, but it is for sure. Like what they can do is they can keep holding out. And I think I saw Michael Kay from like Yes Network say this too, was like, what the players can do is they've lost the last two CBA agreements. Essentially, they've gotten so much taken away from them. Is choose what you want to fight for, really want to fight for this time, get it in, and then go on. And then the next CBA, really fight for that thing you want. Like, it's going to take time to try to get all this back for what you've lost. From a diplomatic standpoint, I'd say you just got to take it one piece at a time, unfortunately. But when you feel like you've been mistreated incredibly, I understand that it's difficult to have that point of view. But there is something to be said, too, about the fact that if MLB shut down, theoretically, say the players just said, no, we're not going to do this unless you agree to these terms. Mm-hmm. The owners, to me, have more to lose, even though I don't think this is agreed upon, because I think that there would be other owners that would make baseball leagues again, that would create different products, because I think you can. You just wouldn't be the billions of billions high. I mean, we've already seen it. There's like the independent league that like used to run with the St. Paul Saints and Fargo, the Fargo Redhawks. Those leagues now become the mainstay and become front and center with new ownership that debatably could have more player-friendly stuff. It wouldn't happen overnight. It would take like 5 or 10 years to make.
I was going to say that's like the worst case scenario.
Yeah, I agree.
I don't think that we're in a situation. I don't even want to start entertaining the idea that baseball is done, period. That's kind of what MLB would have to be done for that to happen. I don't think that's what this is. Lockouts happen occasionally. I think the argument is not about the future of baseball to me, even though people are making it about that. I'm really not concerned about that. The argument to me is more closely around how severe is this lockout going to be. And I think that there's no way it's longer than a year. And I think it's very possible that we just have another shortened season. That's where I'm leaning toward. and I don't know how significantly short it's going to be.
See, I'm actually the opposite. I shouldn't say that. I agree with what you're saying. I don't think it takes longer than a year for it to get resolved at all. I actually do think this is going to affect this sport in a huge way. I think having 2 reduced seasons now, because of a pandemic, which I get it, that sucks, but people weren't able to go to ball games naturally. Having 2021, where you still had a lot of shit centered around the pandemic, and can they actually come back into the stadiums? I mean, Toronto didn't get back into its stadium until halfway through the year.
Right.
So even that was thrown off a little bit. I think they were really looking for 2022 to be the season that everything is just back to normal, back to being what it was. And the fact that there's now player disputes within this and having another shortened season just adds another thing on top of baseball, where they just don't, the owners aren't putting the game towards the fan experience whatsoever. Baseball has become like, I can enjoy it because I'm a nerd,
Right.
and I like analyzing it so much.
Right.
But for any casual viewer that watches it, it's super long, it's super boring. The commercials are too much. It's too tedious of a game. And there's just changes that need to happen with that in order to make it good. It's also too expensive to go to. I get that you can get $5 standing ticket only, but like, I mean, I've done that. It's fine if you want to do that, but like, my God, like anything over the first deck, because you're playing 81 games in them, make them $15 tickets. Literally make a hot dog and a beer like $5. You'll fill the stadium every single day. Like, go back to being what baseball was good at, which was, hey, we're the cheap side of sports where anybody can come, anybody can watch, and getting people out to the ball games will create fans again. That's the only way to do it. You're not going to, if you're trying to compete on TV where there's all these good Netflix programs and Hulu shows and anything's instantaneous, and you're like, oh, here's a 3-hour game of baseball you could watch instead. Nobody does it. Nobody's been doing it. So,
and you're speaking from experience as a commissioner.
Yeah. I'm talking about fantasy baseball only. I'm not even talking about real baseball.
Well, see, that's what's interesting. Sometimes I have to step outside of my perspective as someone that wasn't affected by any of what was happening with the NFL when there was the whole kneeling situation. And I draw that parallel only because that was a pretty significant reason for people to stop watching NFL. That didn't matter one flying fuck to me. I continued to watch that sport as much as I do now, if not more. And that's how I feel with baseball. I don't care if we take a year off. I would return to it with flying colors. It's too much of a part of my identity, which is a depressing thought.
I'm with you, man. Yeah, I love it.
And I don't know. It would have to be completely eradicated before I would move on from it, which is saying a lot. That basically means saying I'm completely committed. Monetarily, I'm not. That's the thing. That's what's interesting about that, is we get into a situation that a lot of businesses have had to embrace in the 20th century, later, I guess, early last 10 years, is a lot of these revenue streams from traditional methods of absorbing content are no longer necessarily predicated on having to spend a lot of money to go to games, for example. Like, I can consume all of my interest in baseball without attending a single game, buying a single jersey, and paying $50 to share with someone for MLB Network or MLB TV.
Yeah.
So I think that a lot of their revenue was a bunch of whales that were like buying season tickets and stuff. So what happens when those people are no longer the people that are the revenue source anymore?
Yeah, I think that's part of the solution, is getting people back in. The thing is, there's, with all the revenue sharing programs right now, there's so much money being made from other big market places like New York that Tampa Bay doesn't need to fill its ballpark to get its revenues.
True.
Because they get it through the networks that are broadcasting the games. And it's also like a big question of availability. Even with MLB.TV, you're not able to get your at home. Like, for us, it's fun because we're fantasy baseball.
Right.
We want to look at every team. We want to watch this. I am not able to watch Twins games on MLB.TV. As a person that would love just an overall place where you could go to watch every game, this would be the if they could somehow do it so there aren't home blackouts, or if they could find a way to make that. And even, this is always an issue I had with it too, is like, even growing up, Sundays, they're on local channels. Anybody can have access to them as long as you literally bought like an antenna. You could watch baseball. It's now only on Fox Sports North. You have to buy cable and DirecTV and all this other stuff in order to watch it. And nobody pays for that. Nobody buys that anymore. Nobody wants to go with that. They really need to go all in on the MLB.TV, make it its own streaming thing, essentially. And like, just say, okay, these are for the people that want to watch baseball. And then if you want to reach a wider market, actually put it back on local channels. Get it back, not only just the Saturday game of the week, get home teams back on a local channel where anybody for free can literally watch it. And it's super easy. And I think it really worked for them. But it's just become so wrapped up in business deals that, in my opinion, aren't actually going to be monetarily better for them.
Yep. And let's shift gears a little bit. Because I don't want to dwell on the lockout too much.
Yeah, I can only get so sad.
I know. I can't, because this is supposed to be a fantasy baseball podcast, not a collective bargaining agreement podcast and broadcasting.
Yeah. Wait, am I part of the union?
So that being said, we did talk about that primarily, I think, because of the fact that we have new competitors in our space, and I'd like to just point out that I think that this competition is only possible because of the success of our podcast. Without the clear amount of millions of dollars we make doing this, why would anyone else want to get in on it?
I 100% agree. Also, like, they're also a company underneath us. Like, they use our equipment. They owe us royalties. They use your space. So really, it's kind of our podcast still in terms, it's just not us individually, but it's still ours. We'll decide if we want them around still or not, and we get to make the decisions.
Right. I agree. Until they buy their own equipment, which, I mean, this microphone was about $13,000. So.
Yeah, think about the barrier to entry.
Oh,
it's just not possible. It's not possible.
Huge barrier to entry.
You think Dylan looking at this equipment wants to buy this? Do you know how much beer he could get for this? No, there's no way.
I have to agree with you. And so one thing that they didn't touch on was the lockout. They kind of just like took 2 minutes. So that's why we're trying to represent on the Dynasty Podcast Bros, which, as a conglomerate organization here, Derek and Donor are part of the Dynasty Podcast Bros. No matter how much they try to claim that they're the Kate Upton podcast or the D&D podcast, which, come on. I mean, D&D, we all know that that's already trademarked. So
yeah, for sure.
So moving on. 2022 fantasy baseball. We've got a draft coming up. We've got compensation players to identify and keep before the draft comes up. And we've got some rule changes to discuss. All of this happens before the season. So of those three things, the draft, keeping your players, and for the people that matters, and the rule changes, what's most important to you?
The most important thing for me is probably the draft, for sure, with the compensation draft. And getting rosters down to an appropriate level within time once this actually gets resolved. So, I mean, I'm going to say it here at the owners meeting, but for anybody that isn't able to attend, basically the order I want things to go in is we talk today about potential changes that we want to make, that anybody wants to make to the league, anything we're unhappy about. I went and updated the bylaws to include new rules that came from last year. One of those is centered around kind of the whole Willem Diaz fiasco of it's a minor league player in our free agent pool. And I wrote it down in writing within the bylaws that they're not allowed to be picked up. There's no ifs, ands, or buts about it. So it's all set in the rules. So that way we can reference it whenever we want to. I made that update. I also updated, I don't know what I had this on last year. I changed the grace period for people on your taxi squad to be 1 day. So like if you miss that they just played a game, you have like a day to solve it instead of like instantaneous, and then your lineup doesn't count. I was like, that can be kind of tough.
A little silly, yeah.
So to me, it was like 1 day, and I didn't really find the necessity for it to be voted on. Mm-hmm. I felt like it's an easy enough change that I could just do subjectively. And then, I kind of just rewrote some of the things I had previously included in there. So if you ever have any questions about the league, always go to the bylaws. I feel like I've covered a wide variety of areas. I also added in lineup punishments for setting illegal lineups and how many warnings you can get. And honestly, I took a pretty strict stance with it. You get one warning only. 2 warnings, you get a second round draft pick taken away. 3 warnings, you get a first. And then 3 or more, we look into possible expulsion from the league.
Oh my God, we've got Putin at commissioner now.
Dude, you're welcome. Watch out, Ukraine. I'm coming.
Too many topical references. I think we should take a radically different approach. I think that you should put the bylaws up and everyone gets a week to memorize them. And then you delete it. And we have a yearly quiz.
There we go. Even I delete it for myself and have to rewrite it every single year.
Yes.
Oh, I might have a job then.
Think about how people would never have questions for you, because that way everyone has to remember, if you fail the quiz, you're out.
Yeah. And it's whatever I decide. This sounds like I'm just like an oligarchy.
Yeah, we're Mao Zedong at commissioner.
Yeah, suck on that. But going back into it a little bit. So talking about just kind of the rules side of it, we are going to be putting the draft on hold and the compensation draft and like protecting players. I'm putting all of this on hold until we figure out what the fuck's going on with our season.
Mm-hmm.
I'm not willing to try to draft yet. I'm not willing to
especially because
anything.
it can change so much.
It can change. It might not even matter. If we go half a season or a full season without baseball, you can't tell me that's not going to trade or change people's minds on who they would pick.
Luckily, we already know how to handle a situation like this.
Yep.
Because we just dealt with it 2 years ago.
Yeah. At least in that way, we got to do a redraft league. We wouldn't even get a redraft league.
To be honest, did that really matter to anyone, though? I think Derek's the only one paying attention, which is why he won.
I liked looking at it from time to time.
Oh, sorry. No, I would want to do a guillotine baseball league.
That would be interesting.
Because it's been fun on the football side.
Just do like a roto type thing, or like
I think so.
Points?
I think that's how you do it.
Okay.
Yeah. I don't know how else you would do it. That's just how. I'm surprised it's not more of a thing, because it's very much a thing for football.
Yeah, I think it's got to be. I mean, it's got to be the fact that in a roto, yeah, I guess you just take the roto
maybe
score.
Not even roto.
See, this is what I would think is just points on that.
I'm fine with that. I've actually been wanting to have an excuse to try points. It's the one league type I've never done.
It'd be just like counting stats only.
Right.
Or then I suppose like in each start, you do like number of earned runs is like a negative point.
Yeah, no, there's a whole sheet of how it works.
Yeah.
The big devalue that happens is for batting, stolen bases. Just you don't need to draft for stolen bases.
Yeah.
Points leagues are more about analyzing players for their real life value, whereas categories is more about like analyzing how players fit into the construct of the categories. That's the big difference. So I've been looking for an excuse to try it. So maybe the lockout is a good excuse.
maybe the question on that is how much time would need to pass during the lockout for that to go into effect.
Yeah, I agree. Well, if there's no end in sight, I guess that's a good question.
To me, it would have to be about 2 months of lost games.
Well, and you know what? It's interesting you say that, because this is a good discussion. I don't know if it would make a difference. If you remember, COVID is different than a lockout, because the reason we canceled altogether was that we knew that even if it came back, it was going to be a drastically different game.
Yep.
So we had made the decision like, no, okay, fuck this, because with COVID, no matter whether the game was being played, look at how many teams didn't have like star players playing all the time because of COVID protocol.
Yep.
That doesn't happen with the lockout. The minute we start the season, it's a normal season. So yeah. I guess to answer your question, I don't know if we would alter it. I don't know if there's a cutoff.
I don't know either. I think there could be, just based off the fact that sample sizes might not be enough. I think baseball is one of the only sports where I feel like sample size really matters for determining winners. Like we could do a season still if we wanted to, but like I think the reason why we cut it off last time, to your point, was COVID, but was also the sample size. It was only going to be 60 games.
Yeah, there wasn't enough.
And teams that were like, I didn't want the victory over a shortened season with it, like what felt like an asterisk on my name because of the lower sample size, if I remember that correctly.
Well, now we just have to add a second asterisk to the year before, and this only has one asterisk.
Yeah,
because the year before wasn't even our dynasty league. To me, I'm still mad about that. I don't think you should deserve to be on the trophy
even
Derek.
With an asterisk.
Yeah,
we don't bury Bonds him at all, or Roger
no. What? It had nothing to do with our dynasty league. You know, do I have to put my name on a trophy because I get out of bed every morning?
Wow, I didn't think about that. Are you also in competition with the other 10 players for getting out of your bed?
I am.
Oh,
There's many
you
times
are.
where I'm like looking at my texts, looking at social media, like, is anyone posting yet? That means,
Mhm.
if they don't, that means they're not out of bed yet. I
So-
win.
Is that's how you measure it? You can only have a social media post outside of your bed. Oh, okay.
Don't fight with me, Cody. I know what I want.
I
know
guess
who I
when you
am.
make the own rules to your own game, you will be the winner. That is right, I guess.
It is. Well, let's not talk about rule changes too much more past that. I think that
Mhm.
was a good basis because obviously we'll talk about it at the owners meeting.
Yep.
I guess moving on to just anything you want to talk about with baseball, man. What is there anything you can think of?
I think to me, it's I just have been thinking about this because this is now going to be like the third or second year of Sam's rebuild. Is what year do you think he needs to like? What year do you think he competes at?
I think I've always kind of said like 2023 was the year.
Okay, so next year.
Yeah, but that those kind of things change so dynamically. It's very possible that based on the results of what happens this year, it could be as soon as this year, or maybe like, oh God, these players, none of them are coming up. So it's gonna be closer to 2 years from now. What do you think?
Yeah, I think depending on who he gets, he needs to start by 2023. If not, I think it's going to be tough. And I think it could potentially look at like, it will answer a question of, are you actually reasonably able to rebuild in this league?
Mm-hmm.
Because
because his team wasn't. It answers an important question for me because his team wasn't amazing when he started the rebuild. It was obviously everyone remembers how his team was before he started rebuilding, or before his team like blew up. But when he actually started rebuilding, it was a very average team. And so that's an important metric to say, because if his team was really good and then he blew it up, I would say that's less interesting, because then it's kind of just saying, okay, if you go from wealth, does when you're poor, is that because you were so wealthy that you now have so many do you know, is what I'm saying making sense?
You're essentially saying wealth carries wealth. Still.
Right.
Like if
Which
you're
is I'm making the comparison to other leagues I've been in, and for people that aren't in the league with us, but in the fantasy football, I'm not as interested in that rebuild because your team was good and you blew it up to get more resources.
right.
So that's why I'm particularly interested in Sam's rebuilding case.
I 100% agree. This is the whole argument. And I don't even think for Sam to be successful, it's even he needs to be a top 2 or 3 team. I think he just needs to show that he can be competitive in order for it to work, because there's always going to be just natural variance that can occur, especially within fantasy baseball on a year-to-year basis. But he needs to be a top 5 team. Within the next 3 or 4 years, he needs to be. And if he isn't, I think there will be arguments to be made of like what needs to be done in order to make that more accessible.
Yeah.
Because like we know that teams are going to have to do that. It's always going to be inevitable.
No, I never plan on rebuilding.
Yeah, well, I know you don't. Wealth breeds wealth.
Early on in my fantasy career, I thought like, oh, it'd be fun to try a rebuild sometime, but it gives me way too much anxiety. I know some people like it. I don't ever want to rebuild.
Yeah.
And I know that makes me a worse player for it, but
it's fine whatever you want to do with it.
Right,
you can just go off the natural variance. There's different ways of thinking about it.
Yeah. So anyway, I guess the other thing too is, do we really trust Sam to be our guinea pig? I mean, come on. What does he know how to build the team?
Yeah. When has he ever won? Oh, wait.
But I don't want to talk about this too much because I know it pisses a lot of people off that basically he just fed off of your AAA squad.
Okay. Me and Sam, I totally get this, like the argument on that a little bit. But we made fair trades. So what is that?
Yeah.
But also, if you've been able to look at who I've been able to draft within these last years, I don't understand why I have the players I have.
Okay. Yeah. But that's, I don't like that argument, just because that's true doesn't make what everyone's case against it okay.
No, I'm not saying I'm not saying that plays the only part into it.
No,
I'm saying from mine and Sam's trades, if you actually look back on them, most of them haven't been good for me. Unless you're trying to argue for Sam, it's been really good.
Well,
because,
you would know more than I would.
I mean, the 2 pitchers I got from Sam were Yu Darvish and Trevor Bauer. How's that looking? Not very fucking good.
Yeah, but I've always hated this, and you've always hated that. You can't say that, because just because that's the case now, those are extenuating circumstances that way out of our control that we couldn't have predicted. both of those players. Less so you, Darvish.
Yeah, less so.
Way more Trevor
Yeah,
Bauer.
I agree with that, but I gave him value that he needed in order to rebuild.
Yeah.
I mean, like, this is where I understand what you're saying. I would understand the argument had I ripped him off. Had I given him shit players for, like, not top prospects, like shit players for those guys, then yeah, I would agree with that. But the thing is, like, there was always the argument to be made that anybody else can make trades with Sam. He wasn't just going to me.
But that's where I just see that's actually, and I don't want to, I'll say one more thing about this and then you get to say one more thing about
Fair enough.
Because otherwise we will waste too much time. That has never been my argument.
Okay.
Because it's been the opposite for me. I don't like the idea that people in a league can, I've always hated, the one thing I want to fix about fantasy is that it appears as though people that are friends make more deals than other way around. And that has never been more the case in any close metric than by what happened in this situation. That it did feel like, because of your guys' close relationship outside of it, you were able to accomplish more than someone else could that doesn't have a close relationship with Sam. And so this goes back to the whole, like, my reputation argument, basically. To say that it's like, that's what I didn't like about it. You know that I don't have a problem with, I've never said it's a breach of the rules and it's not cheating or anything, but I don't like it. It doesn't feel, it goes against the nature of what's fun about fantasy to me.
It doesn't to me. I got the team, but I understand that. But I think in a competitive nature, that's the point of this. Not every team is going to be able to be even with each other in a dynasty league or in a league of any. You need to have trades in order to balance that. The way to counteract me is then trade with your friends that you have in this league and make deals that make your team better. Sam's just as good as my friend, as he is your friend, as he is Matt's friend.
I just don't like trading. Yeah,
you don't like trading, and that's fine.
And I just happen to like it. Oh, I'm validating, or Jesus Christ, holy crap, I'm breaking the rules I said
about talking.
Yeah. All right. So I said my last thing. This is the last thing, and then we got to move on because we've already talked about.
We're gonna start fighting over here.
I
think for me, what I would say, just last statements on it is what it is now. Adapt.
And overcome.
Adapt and
overcome.
Are you, the
Marines?
I'm literally the billionaires of the world. Pull yourself up by your bootstraps and start winning.
All right. Perfect way to segue. Speaking of winning, let's just go super bare bones. I can't remember the last time we've done an argument like this, because we always talk about podcasts, or we always talk about, like, our teams. Who of any player in Major League Baseball as a batter do you want to own more than anyone? It's been a while since we've actually talked about
just talk about like an overall batter.
Who's the best player?
Oh, just like who's the best batter?
Who's your favorite batter that you want to own right now?
Anybody.
You're not supposed to think this much.
Well, yeah, I didn't realize this is going to be out there. You know what? I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to say Vladimir Guerrero.
Yeah, I would agree with that.
This wasn't much of an argument.
I mean, I would say because I think most people don't even list him as the top person, but that's the person I would prefer to own the most.
Yeah, I think the most people's consensus pick is Fernando Tatis, and I actually have him as my number 2. But Vlad number 1 for me, just because of the stability I know I have with Vlad.
I also like Acuna though. Still,
Acuna is up there too. But I think I don't know what it is, man. I think it's just like I buy so much into K rates, like K percentages for batters. And the fact that he is able to consistently keep his strikeout rate extremely low, which is something both Tatis and Acuna do not do. It always spells trouble for me that if one little thing goes wrong for them, they will lose their value. They have speed, and I'll give them that. They do have speed, and they will get stolen bases, where Vlad will not. But where Vlad, to me, thrives is he's a very good batter at a position that is scarily or very I know I can't talk. That has become very dry, like bone dry at first base. First basemen were always known for being very big power hitters that could do all this stuff, and you don't need to worry about them. I don't feel that way about first baseman anymore. I feel like there's only a handful of guys that can hit over 30 home runs at that position as of right now. And out of them, I don't trust any of them with OBP. Like, or I do some of them, but not a lot of them, if that makes sense.
Yeah, well, it's interesting. In previous years or in the last few years, we're at the point now where the difference between like third base, first base, and outfield really isn't that much anymore because so many teams are starting to just like move those players around interchangeably. In general, the MLB is becoming more of a utility sport with fielding.
Yep.
So I don't think that disparate, because it used to be more like, okay, if you can't field, you play first, or if you used to be able to field but now you're older, so you don't have as good as reflexes, you go to first base.
Yep.
That's kind of not really happening as much anymore, and it's more like everywhere is equidistant. I mean, look at like the second base position in baseball. Pretty like it feels like 75% of the playable second basemen in fantasy baseball right now play other positions too.
Yeah.
So that's, and same with outfield. So many of them come play in the infield. So I guess I'm making that argument because I'm starting to perceive positions and the scarcity within positions is not a big deal in years past as it was in years past. Even with catcher, I feel the same way.
That could be fair for some of the normal positions, like if you want to talk about infield positions.
Yeah.
I still think there's a huge scarcity of second basemen, and there always will be. Like as far as teardrops off there.
Not real. See, that's where we disagree.
Really? You don't think like after like Whit Merrifield, it really drops off?
Well, that's like 8.
That's
people.
4.
Oh,
that's
you
like
put
4 or 5.
Merrifield at 4?
Not dynasty, but as far as like 2022. He was number 4 last year.
Yeah, I mean, because it's like what? Oh God, I don't want to do this right now.
I mean, the number 1 is Trey Turner right now, which I mean that seems pretty obvious. You have Ozzie
Albies and obviously Merrifield. God, I don't want to rattle them all off.
Then there's DJ LeMahieu.
Right.
You could have up there. I mean, you can have guys up there.
My point is that so many of these players have second base eligibility, so the scarcity is not as great as what you think it is.
I think it just changed to be that way with
like
some
Javi's up there too.
Javi, yeah. Some of those shortstops are gaining it, but I think that's because some of them are starting to move over to second base. I think when you're getting these super teams, you are starting to get more second basemen off that, which is what. Yeah, well, I think Corey Seager's only shortstop.
I don't think so.
Is he second base?
I think he's got second base.
Okay, I can look into it, but I think at the end of the day, the way I think about that though is you can say, oh, they have second base eligibility, but if you're looking at it, starting them on an actual roster, you need to put them somewhere. You still need that shortstop then. If you're moving all these guys over into your second baseman rankings, then you don't have your shortstops. You know what I mean? They can only go one or the other for positionals. Like this is kind of what I've thought about that, at least, is like I can have a top shortstop / second baseman, but then I can only put them in one spot. I don't have a top 10 shortstop and a top 10 second baseman. I have one or the other. So you have to make it work from there. So that's where I talk about positional scarcity, where it might not just be second baseman. Maybe it's second baseman / shortstop then. It's middle infield versus corner infield. The only other spot I think about that too, when I start thinking about that, is left field. Left field is actually pretty scarce right now.
Yeah, I wouldn't do it any other way, the way we do it, where we actually divide out outfielders like that. I hate when they just say like 5 outfielders.
Oh, yeah, I agree.
Yeah,
I think
makes it less interesting.
This is so much more interesting when you divide it between left field, center field, and right field.
Yeah, I think maybe what I'm getting at without articulating OL is that I care less about positions than I ever have this year, especially when evaluating prospects. As a dynasty player, I don't give a fuck about what position you play.
Oh, yeah.
Because I can always adjust in my free agents. I can adjust during the draft, and I can adjust. So like I pretty much, I only care if you're a hitter or a pitcher.
Yeah.
Even catchers, there have been so many good catching prospects lately. And a lot of rumors or not even rumors, but we've seen it happen where they just move to like first base or something now. So I just don't give a fuck about what position you play.
Yeah, catching prospects are generally, depending on where you look, are less intriguing to me. Just normally due to the fact that the reason why they're so high is because they play
because
catcher.
They're catcher.
So
right.
I've stopped looking at that as much. Like that doesn't change my opinion of Adley Rushman. Like I love the guy. Yeah, it doesn't change anything with him.
What about Joey Bart? Same thing. Although he's not.
Oh, I think it changes it with Joey Bart. Yeah. I think it always did.
Yeah,
for him too. I mean, like it's these guys that hit well for a catcher, but because they're a catcher, they're a big prospect.
I'm kind of wondering if that's going to stop being a trend, though, is what I'm getting at. that like I'm wondering if it's going to stop being a trend that you come up as a catcher and then your value is predicated on you being a catcher. Like we're starting to see more creativity with eligibility and having catchers on their off days play first or having catchers on their off days play DH. So it makes it so I at least I hope that, because I don't want the catcher to become just like a position that's tight end in football, which it is right now.
Sure. I think you're going to always have guys that need to be like, you're going to have the 50-50 guys, right? They are going more to a league where catchers are kind of like running backs.
Mm-hmm.
You don't catch a guy for 150 games. And this is kind of how it always was,
Right.
but even more so, they've gone to the 50-50 method where you have two catchers. This one catches this many games, this one catches this, and then you maybe throw them in DH. But the only issue with the DH perspective for my thing is that doesn't really do anything for our fantasy league. I mean, like, if you put them in DH, no, it doesn't,
because they have enough games to have catcher eligibility.
Yep.
But then if they play DH more as a fantasy owner, that makes me thrilled because A, they're getting more playing time instead of just sitting on the bench. B, they're getting less strain on the body.
From that perspective, yeah.
So that's really ultimately where I'm really going with this, is that when I really think about it, this is why I want DH nationally or universally DH.
That's already agreed upon.
Yeah. Is it really for sure?
Yeah.
Final now? Oh.
Yeah, they've talked about that. That concession was already made. That starting this year, they'll do universal DH.
Well, I guess it's not in writing though yet, right?
I mean, I guess not. I guess nothing's in writing from that perspective.
I didn't know that. I didn't know that that's okay. Well, that's good, because to me I think that will single-handedly fix the catcher issue, because I really do believe if you have a good hitting catcher, you are going to have like your backup catcher, and you're going to have your catcher that's really your catcher that plays DH and catcher. Boom, problem solved. Like,
yeah, you could have some of that.
Like Salvi did that for most of last year.
Yeah, just catcher and DH. Yeah.
So I think that model is not. I think that's a great model.
I think it is good. I still think catchers are going to be kind of predicated on their defense more than their bats. Just even having two catchers, they'll do that still. I agree with you. It'll be better than it's been in years past.
Yes,
for sure.
Yeah.
From
That's
that
what I'm
perspective,
hoping for.
I've always been a person that with prospects, you always just draft best available.
Mm-hmm.
That's how I feel.
Unless they're a pitcher.
I think pitchers to me already have a discount on them unless I'm seeing something that I love. Like, unless I'm seeing, like, to me, like, unless they're Grayson Rodriguez,
right? I
really don't care.
But it does well. But then, do you even care about Grayson Rodriguez? Because Forrest Whitley was Grayson Rodriguez, and look what happened to that fucker.
Trust me, I get it.
I don't draw a line at any prospect for pitching, to be honest.
I still think I think what you need to do more is there just needs to be patience that comes more with pitchers. I think the issue with prospect pitchers is they come up, they perform like shit for the first 4 years of their career, and then they figure it out or they don't. And that's where it comes. We've talked about this. In majors, prospect pitchers are much more, to me, look a lot better than prospect pitchers.
Yeah, which is why that's why I'm saying I don't want to invest in minor league prospects.
Yeah, I get that.
There's a difference. You can still invest in pitching without investing as early as you do in batting.
I agree with that for sure. I think it is easier, but it also feels riskier. I think it's hard to bring yourself to that when you see a guy struggling in the MLB as a pitcher to be like, I really want to acquire that guy.
Mm-hmm.
I think it's just a hard thing to do versus
hard.
Versus looking at minor league stats and looking to see if they're successful, especially with the fact that it feels like if you can be successful in AAA as a pitcher, you actually can be successful in the majors. There's a lot of pitching prospects I've seen that once they get to AAA, seems like that's where they start struggling.
Mm-hmm.
Like they're fine in single A, which everybody is. Mm-hmm. And then AA always feels like, oh, that's kind of the next step. And then like, it's almost like restoring faith in me that like AAA matters for pitchers. Don't just do like the batter AA type system and then call them up from there and skip AAA altogether. It's like pitchers need to go to AAA. I mean, like, who was I looking at recently that just did that? I think it's one of the top pitching prospects. I want to say it's Cade Cavalli for the Nationals. Did really good in A-ball and I think AA. Moved up really fast. Got to AAA and sucked. He was very bad. And it's like, well, you have to like reanalyze him. And if he had only had his AA stats, you would have been like, oh, this guy's fantastic. This guy's the next big thing. So
that's because every year or every step along the way, it's a step up, you know? And some people's arsenals or skill sets is not ready to adjust to that step. And it's more about development, you know?
Yeah. It just takes so much time. I've really liked the approach that the Rays have taken with the young pitchers, which is why I think we see them being more successful, is they almost account for, to me, the last step for a pitcher always to get is never stuff. It's accuracy. It's always command and accuracy. It will forever be that. And they are just take the approach of, I'm going to aim right down the middle of the plate with my catcher, and your natural missing ability will hit corners and will be effective enough, because they play the argument your inability to command will make you command, which is kind of backwards.
Yeah.
But it works for guys like Glass now. And I think they did that. They did that with another pitcher, but I'm blanking on the name. They did it with Patino. But the only issue there was he was actually better at commanding than they thought.
Right. Yeah. Well, that's interesting. Okay. So going back to the whole, like, who would you most want to have? We kind of talked about this before the podcast, but for pitchers, how do you feel about that?
That one is tough, man.
It's changed so much.
I think from a dynasty perspective, I think it's Corbin Burns to me.
Yeah, because what's he, 26 now?
Yeah, I think he's significantly younger than the rest. And I get that, like, this happened with Shane Bieber before too.
I know, that's what's so funny.
I get that.
It's changed 3 times in the last few years.
It's crazy.
4 times maybe.
I think there's just, from a dynasty perspective, there's just so much more in the tank for those guys, where, like, even Shane Bieber to me, even though he fell, is going to be a top 20 starter almost every single year until the end of his career. And, like, Corbin Burns, I have no reason to drop him below top 10 for any year upcoming here.
Still crazy how he came out of nowhere to me.
Kind of, yeah. He did. But that checks out for pitchers. All it takes is like a Carlos Rodon velocity ad or some little tweak, and then they can just hit it, and then they find it, and that's all it takes.
Which is funny you mentioned Carlos Rodon, because I struggle with how to perceive him, because the fact that his velocity went up like 4 miles an hour from before, I don't know if it's 4 miles, but it was something ridiculous.
It was like 3.
Yeah, it was. Like,
he went from like 94 to 97 with his fastball.
Before injury and after injury. Just goes to show you that, like, sometimes the rehab process for guys that are like that have the mental fortitude, the rehab process can actually be more of a formative thing than it can be like a rehabilitative thing.
Yeah.
Think of Adrian Peterson too. Like, he was a better athlete arguably after, because the work he put in to get back to where he was ended up being to overcorrect. It's like crazy.
It depends. I actually think it's critical how teams handle injuries.
Yeah.
I think it's, if teams handle it correctly, as like when a guy's not feeling good, they address it right away. I think they can save them some time and actually make the IR or IL experience really beneficial, because it gives them necessary rest in order to regrow a lot of these areas that have just been worn down over the years.
Right.
I think from that, I actually really want to transition into, I know you only said for young guys, what do you expect to come out of Justin Verlander's year?
Well,
that is such a huge question for me.
I would have married Verlander over my current wife if I had the opportunity.
Yeah. Is he, maybe I'll put it in different terms, is he a top 20 pitcher to you?
Was he a top 20 pitcher before he got injured?
I thought he was. I could be wrong, but I mean, I thought he was like a top 10 again.
Yeah, because he's on the Astros.
Just for like a year ranking, not a dynasty ranking.
So I'm going to throw what my initial thought process is. And this might be wrong. And I'm sure if Derek were here, fuck him, because he would correct me.
Yep.
But I feel as though a lot of what made Justin Verlander good after he left the Tigers was because it was the Houston Astros effect.
Yep.
And if I get my timelines correct, I'm not sure if the because of what happened with the Houston Astros cheating scandal, I'm not sure if the Houston Astros effect is there anymore. So when you couple that with his Tommy John surgery, because I think a lot of what the Houston Astros effect was not only predicated on their cheating, but because it really wasn't for pitching, their cheating, but it was the sticky stuff.
Yep.
So now if you take sticky stuff out of the equation, plus age, plus Tommy John, that's a lot of things adding up against him to make him a top 20 pitcher. Like, I think he'll be a great pitcher. But I would say like 30.
Yeah. To me, he's a top 40 pitcher with potential to get, like, higher potential than anybody in that area to get into top 20, if that makes sense. He is the guy in the 40th range that I would love to take at that spot with the high potential upside. He does, in my opinion, also carry a lower floor as a result of the injury and all this stuff as well.
And it's worth noting that the Astros paid 2 years, $50 million for him. Baseball owners don't typically just want to give money to players for fun. That's a lot of money for a speculative buy. And I say that because you always got to wonder who knows more about the player than anyone else.
Yep.
It's the Astros. So that's a pretty significant investment. So it makes me think that they are very confident in his recovery process and that his age is not a factor.
Yeah, it probably is too. It could be something as simple as the ownership saying we need to keep one of our guys around because we lost Correa and we're losing figureheads for us.
Well, they haven't lost Correa yet, but I guess it is all.
They lost Correa. There's no way. The way he talked about it, there's no way he goes back to them. Right. But like, you just want to keep almost like a familiar face around your World Series win because it's like, oh, remember this guy?
Remember when we
won the World Series? But you cheated. Yeah, but remember?
Yeah, he's going to be really interesting to watch. I greatly look forward to that. That's probably the number one pitcher I'm excited to watch more than him and DeGrom, actually.
Yeah.
Because and I think I'm not alone. It's pretty common. People love to watch the Hall of Fame players and see what they can do. It's the same thing Kershaw. I think 2 years ago, we were like, oh, I'm excited now that he's supposed to be coming back in full force. Let's see how good he is. And want to know what happened? He's not a top 10 pitcher anymore. So
he's still a damn good pitcher.
Oh, yeah, exactly.
But yeah, I agree.
Yeah, I mean, those three, Scherzer, Verlander, and Kershaw are the best pitchers of the generation. And then DeGrom is like a new generation in my eyes.
Yeah, DeGrom's kind of that middle type stuff. But DeGrom's, I'd say like the ceiling has just like, I guess ceilings are about the same for all of them. They've all been just like uber elite.
Yeah, I don't even want to try to split hairs. Yeah. I mean, those four are just crazy.
Yeah, it'll be interesting to see because like the Verlander Kershaw injuries to me are different from the DeGrom worrying, if that makes sense. DeGrom hasn't had nearly as many innings on his arm as Kershaw did when he got injured. That was like the thing with Kershaw. It's like when he was 30, everybody was super worried about him. Not because so much the age, just because the usage on his arm already. He'd already pitched like what felt like 10 years.
Well, he also had back issues, if I remember correctly, which is similar to what Verlander had on the Tigers. And that scares me more than arm issues almost.
Yeah. I agree. Personally. I actually think like everything from a pitcher comes from your legs. Mm-hmm. Your arm is literally just directs. That's all your arm does. The power comes from your legs and from your back. Mm-hmm. If you can't sustain those, I really get worried.
I know. Right. Which is what just amazes me about these athletes that can do it for so long.
Yeah. It truly is just like finding a rhythm and a repetition that is easy to repeat, low impact on your arm, but effective against batters. Mm-hmm. That's really the three equations that go into being a pitcher.
Makes me think that Tom Brady at 45 years old now could just come be a pitcher.
Yeah, probably can.
I think about that sometimes. I really do. Like for a guy that's as dedicated as him, what if he just went at like 35 years old, said that, hey, I've seen a lot of people in baseball have as long of a career as I want to have, but not get fucked in the head and slammed in the knees.
Yeah.
What if I would just went to baseball? You know, it's a very different motion. I get it. And it's a much more cerebral game, arguably, in football. But it'd be interesting to see if someone like him could come over and do anything.
The person that would actually stick out to me that I would love to see right now, give it a shot, is Kyler Murray.
Oh yeah,
with
right.
His
Former
issues,
baseball player, right?
Yeah, with the issues. Yeah, I think he was a first round pick for the Oakland Athletics.
Yeah, he was I think he was 9th.
Yeah, and they just obviously didn't get to keep him.
Yeah,
he's a player, especially with his issues with the Cardinals now. I would love to see him come over and just pitch a season in the MLB, or maybe not even the MLB, the minors. Yeah. Just see what he has, because he's got a strong arm. It's clear to see that he has that. Yeah. A lot of people thought he was like, obviously a very good quarterback. They thought he was like, look at where he was drafted. He was an elite baseball prospect.
But wasn't he supposed to be a pitcher though?
Yeah, I thought so.
Oh, it wasn't infield, like shortstop or something?
Oh, maybe. I thought it was pitcher, but I could look.
Right. Quick.
Here, I'll look. Yeah, we planned this.
Right. No, that is really interesting though. I looked up Kyler Murray baseball position.
It came quarterback. I got the same exact thing.
Shit.
He was a starting quarterback. Apparently he was a quarterback in baseball. That is all we know
That's
so
the
far.
consensus. Outfielder, it looks like it says. He was an
Oh, was
outfielder
he?
with Oklahoma.
I could see that too, I suppose, but
So
maybe I guess not pitching. But I think you could transition him
yeah,
into one.
I wasn't trying to correct you. Really, I was
Yeah.
trying to say I'm interested in that too, because I'm wondering if the skills of being a quarterback translate at all. I mean, I don't want to sound like a naff. I understand significant differences in how to throw football and and what baseball pitching is.
So what we argue in baseball is a pitcher versus a thrower. Noah Syndergaard is a thrower, not a pitcher.
Correct. And that's what I think. If someone like Kyler came over, he would be I mean, it's no different than when like the position players come in and they can throw 90, but they don't have a curveball. They don't have an arsenal, right?
Right. And you can learn that stuff. I mean, DeGrom was drafted as a shortstop.
Yeah.
He wasn't even drafted as a pitcher.
And that's ultimately what I'm getting at, is it would be interesting to see these players that have success like this come over to other sports.
Yeah. I 100% agree.
Yeah. But I imagine that you wouldn't want to do a cross thing, like do both, because
I don't think you could. Your arm would die.
And it would be bad for I imagine it'd be bad for your technique. If you're focusing on how to throw a football for half the year, then you go throw a baseball.
I think it makes sense for all the people that were dual sports that played baseball. It's also interesting, by the way, that they all were in baseball.
Like, I know, yeah.
I've noticed that too. And I don't know if it just aligns with years, but like, it's like, because wasn't Deion Sanders also a two-way? Didn't he play a little baseball?
Or no? I don't know.
Maybe not Deion Sanders. What was I thinking? Oh, maybe I'm thinking he played offense and defense, and that's what I'm thinking.
He definitely did that.
It's like Bo Jackson though. Obviously did both.
Everyone knows him.
Everybody knows
Jordan
him. Michael Jordan did both, and whatever.
Yeah, it is interesting. The baseball is always like the second one. It's never fucking hockey.
No, it's just the skill sets don't align.
Yeah. You're either a puckhead or you're not a puckhead.
Right. You don't think Krzysztof Jankovic is going to play baseball after his hockey season?
No. Although, let me take it back, because I think about Adam Sandler. Happy Gilmore played hockey and golf.
Oh, I like it. That'd be fun to see.
That would be actually. I would really enjoy. Although I think it'd be easy. Well, no, okay. No, it would be a lot easier to come over from hockey to play golf, I think, than the other way around. I don't think so.
No, I don't think. Yeah,
play golf can go play hockey.
Could you imagine John Daly on a hockey rink, literally just checking guys left and right with his beer gun?
Beers on the sides. Put me in quarter. I'm ready to go out there.
John, you need a stick. No, I don't.
Just fucking boots it.
Yeah. He's just like aiming for guys, just like coming in with his full body, man.
I would watch the fuck out.
Oh, yeah. I mean, he drinks enough beer. He should be a hockey player.
Yeah, but no, for sure. Because the hockey athletes, I can imagine that they would be able to actually translate to golf at least a little bit.
You would think.
Because there's a lot of those core muscles they build that would translate well to a powerful drive. And like I think that they would be great like distance players, but then really struggle on with like wedges.
I actually think a fun league would be like quarterbacks that are now golfers. Yeah. There seems to be a big correlation about like quarterbacks that are really good golfers.
Well, that's what I like about golf, is that anyone can play golf.
Yeah.
You know, that's what's fun to when I do watch golf. It's that I feel like anyone could do what they're doing if you put enough time into it.
Because it's all stationary.
Exactly. That's not how it is with any of the other sports.
No.
There's more natural gifts involved. So
it makes sense too, because golf is such a mental sport, and quarterback is such a mental position that they just kind of go hand in hand.
I agree. That's why it was so fun to watch that Tiger Phil and Brady Rogers thing.
Yeah, it's so cool.
I agree. Yeah, and plus I think it was just cool because it was so cool to have them mic'd up.
Yeah,
which I know that they've had other tournaments too where they mic up the players. I just want to see more of that, in the same way that basketball really embraced that aspect of the game, where and they don't mic them, but they really embrace the aspect of like these players are personalities that play a sport.
Yeah,
I like that they're starting to do that more with golf too.
Yeah, the spring training mic ups they used to do with players was fucking awesome.
Yeah,
it was so cool.
Yeah,
and like you probably couldn't do it in basketball. I feel like you'd have to bleep out every
Swear,
third word. Yeah, you have to bleep out every third word. Mother bleep, son of a bleep.
Right. And hockey, the mics would get damaged from all the checking.
Yeah. Right? This guy's like, oh, I gotta fight this guy. Yeah. And literally, you just hear, get down, stay down.
It sounds like a Capcom versus Marvel fighting game.
Yeah, you're literally like, are we watching MMA?
Yeah. which is not a sport that I give a shit about. So I was
Nope,
gonna
I'm
try to
with you.
comment on it, but
Yeah. Remember that one guy that punched that other guy?
oh yeah, remember what? Actually, do you remember when we went to Ireland and we hung out with those one guys that claimed that one of the guys claimed that he had seen not Ewan McGregor, who's the fucking Conor McGregor?
Oh yeah. They're all the same guy.
They are. No, do you remember that at all? That he claimed that he saw like, we were hanging out, we were doing coke with Conor McGregor the other day.
Oh my, was that the California guys?
Yes.
Yeah. Yep. I remember them.
I was like, okay, calm down there, shooter. There's no way he did that.
Yeah. And some guys are like, these idiots think I'm Conor McGregor. And I just wanted free coke.
It was definitely just Ewan McGregor.
Yeah. Idiots. That'll show them.
Oh, good shit. All right, let's do a time check here. We
You
never actually take the time to check the time.
Probably make it.
It's been an hour.
It's been an hour.
I think this is a good time to cut it off.
Yeah, I think we started diving into other areas that weren't baseball. Yeah, but I think we covered everything we really wanted to cover.
I think we did too. I think this is a good place to say our last thoughts. Anything you want to share is like a last thing.
Baseball, please come back.
Oh yeah, Cox out to end the lockout.
Yeah,
man.
Cox out to end the lockout. I am really excited for the rookie draft for that coming up. I think I want our next podcast to be when the lockout is finally lifted and we can start discussing baseball again too, especially rookie draft and free agents that are out there, and we can start diving into the compensation draft a little bit more and do more analysis work rather than us just struggling to be like, yep, there's a lockout.
Which is okay,
yeah.
But it's just, it felt like it would have been a waste of time to do any analysis.
I know. It's just like next thing you know, 2 months, it's like, oh yeah, by the way, everything changed.
Right. Well, especially because it is real to consider that the lockout could change quite a bit.
Yep.
Because if they do make it more valuable to call up prospects
Yep.
and not manipulate service time, that changes analysis of who to draft so much more.
100%.
I think. I mean, maybe I'm overrating it. It at least has a factor.
No, I agree. I think my one question for you that I wanted to talk about the compensation draft pick before we just like end this really quick.
Mm-hmm.
Is there a chance, and Derek brought this up, is there a chance with Anthony Volpe out there that any one of those top 4 teams chooses to go with a rookie draft pick instead of the compensation draft pick?
Yeah, and that's where it comes down to, you have to look at who the available players are. And I think the answer to that is do you think any of the teams?
Any of the
absolutely.
4.
Yeah.
You think so?
Yeah,
you think like the number 4 team? I don't know who it is off the top of my head. I think it's like Alex or Gronley.
Yeah. Intuitively, I think that the first few compensation picks, at least one of them is going to be more valuable than Volpe is.
Yeah.
Especially because there are, if I remember correctly, there are a couple players that are fairly young available.
Yeah, there's some good young talent
depending on
out
who
there.
People keep, of course.
Yep.
But then it's the spectrum, because if people keep their young talent, then there's still like fairly young good talent. You know what I'm getting at with this.
Yeah.
So no, the answer is yes, but it's not. So it's gonna be somewhere in the middle, I think.
Yeah, maybe 2 or 3 where it could
Yeah.
happen. The only reason I bring that up is because I'd be interested to see if that changes even the opinions of like the first or second team where they choose now. You know, the reason why I say this is because Sam has, I think Derek was the 5th team. Sam has that pick. So Sam ideally could get a comp pick and get the top rookie free agent draft if it all 4 happens. But at the same point, if one of those 3 teams chooses to go rookie free agent draft, Sam will get a comp pick still, but then he might not get Anthony Volpe.
Right.
It's just going to be interesting to see how it all plays out and what they think is the best decision.
And does anyone even own like Robert Hassel?
Oh, Sam does.
Oh,
He drafted him last time.
of course he fucking has him. Jesus.
Yeah, name a minor leaguer. Sam has him.
Yes, it feels like it. Yeah, I think that it's more than likely to be like 1, 2, 3, Volpe 4.
Could potentially see that.
Yeah,
For sure.
Okay.
But that's just where I wanted to ask.
No, that's a good
to end it
question.
on.
Yeah. Okay. I guess my last thought is I'm happy. I would be happy to embrace another 3rd podcast under the Dynasty Podcast Bros media outlet.
Yep.
That we are, the giant powerhouse. So if there were some people, Matt and Nick, that wanted to join and have their own podcast, we would be more than happy to allow you into our YouTube channel. That would be a total of 4 different podcasts we'd have on that.
Wow.
I mean,
we're
really, we should start making our own
Yeah.
network.
Sorry, I'm gonna add one last thought in there. PS thought.
Yeah.
I noticed, by the way, we got a comment on one of our videos
Okay.
from some random ass person that said, "Hey guys, really love your videos. Have you thought about expanding them?"
Really?
We got a promotional comment from somebody trying to get us a sign with somebody to.
Oh,
you
it's not like
it's not real. No, it's spam.
It's okay.
It's spam for sure.
Aw.
But it was funny because
I think I
I
saw
read
that.
it and I got so excited and then I was so let down. It was so funny because I was like, somebody besides our league listened to this, and it was like, nope, the computer did.
Yeah, it's like when you get those emails at work and you don't know, and it's some person, either a salesperson or someone else that's like, I took a look at your resume on LinkedIn and had your email address on file and think you're a great person
Yep.
to do this. I've gotten a couple of those, but
It's awful.
Yeah, it is sad. But who knows? Part of me, now that I'm a salesperson, part of me wonders, I'm just saying, part of me wonders, because whenever I send emails like that, I mean them genuinely. But then again, I don't see emails like that.
Yeah.
But I think, what if some of these things really are opportunities and they just are coming across as what if we could have been retired by now because we just had a couple years podcasting and we'd have taken. All right, I'm going off the rails. So thank you for listening to the Midwest Dynasty Fantasy Baseball Podcast. We'll catch you guys later. Peace.